Pittsburgh, 1924. Point Breeze District. Early morning. The air is thick with limestone dust, so dense it settles on skin and coats the lungs with every breath. The sound of sledgehammers echoes through the quiet streets, drowning out birds' carriages and the distant hum of a waking city. Stone cracks. Glass shatters. Wood splinters. A group of workers moves with cold efficiency, tearing apart a building that, only a few years earlier, had been called the architectural crown of Pennsylvania. This is not a slum clearance. This is not fire damage. This is not punishment from creditors or revenge from rivals. This is a deliberate execution. The mansion is called Green Lawn, and the man who built it is already immortal. Henry John Heinz. By 1924, his name is stamped on millions of glass bottles across the world. His factories operate day and night. His brand has survived scandals, depressions, and wars. The Heinz Empire is at the height of its power. Yet here, stone by stone, his personal palace is being erased. French chateau-style walls, meant to stand for centuries, are dismantled like stage props. Stained glass imported from Europe explodes under hammer blows. Hand-carved oak panels, polished for years by master craftsmen, are tossed into heaps of debris, destined for fire or landfill. Those watching understand something unnatural is happening. A paradox. The empire stands, but the heart of the empire is being destroyed. The demolition orders are signed not by enemies but by blood. Howard, Clifford, Irene Heinz. The children of the Ketchup King. Just 5 years earlier, in 1919, Henry Heinz died inside one of these bedrooms, confident he was leaving behind more than wealth. He believed Green Lawn would become an American castle, a dynasty estate, where grandchildren would run through gardens and glasshouses, protected from the soot and chaos of industrial Pittsburgh. He was wrong. To his heirs, Green Lawn was not a blessing. It was a curse. They called it a white elephant, beautiful, enormous, and useless. A monument that consumed money, energy, and life itself. A museum soaked in their father's obsession. A mausoleum that refused to let the past die. They tried to give it away to the city, to charities, to institutions. No one wanted it. Even for free, the cost of heating, staffing, and maintaining over 30 rooms in a new economic era terrified the wealthy. The world had changed. Grandeur had become a liability. The irony is merciless. While Green Lawn is torn apart, Heinz's red brick factory on the Allegheny River stands unshaken. An industrial fortress that will outlive wars, depressions, and generations. The place where he made money survives. The place where he was human does not. Within weeks, only a wrought iron fence and a lonely carriage house remain. The land is divided, sold, forgotten. The man is erased. Only the brand survives. But to understand why his children destroyed what should have been sacred, we must go back 50 years, before the palace, before the empire, before the glass bottles. We must understand what Henry John Heinz was made of, and what tragedy turned a dream home into a golden cage his heirs were desperate to escape. This is not a story of success. This is a story of ambition colliding with silence, of greatness echoing through empty rooms, of a man who tried to build eternity and learned too late that time does not live indoors. 1844, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Before the mansions, before the glasshouses, before the name became a global label, there was a city that did not feel like a place where dreams should survive. Pittsburgh in the mid-19th century was not romantic. It was not elegant. It was not kind. It was a furnace wearing the disguise of a town. Smoke sat in the air like permanent weather. Coal dust settled onto windowsills, clothes, food, even the skin of children. There were days when noon looked like dusk and nights when flames from ironworks painted the clouds orange, as if the city itself was burning from the inside out. A few years later, writer James Parton would call Pittsburgh hell with the lid taken off, and people who lived there would not argue with him. This is where Henry John Heinz was born. Not into aristocracy, not into old money, not into the East Coast elite. He was born into discipline. His parents, Frederick and Margareta Heinz were strict German Lutherans, the kind of people who believed faith was proven through routine, that character was built through work, and that comfort was a temptation. The house was not a place to lounge. It was a place to do what needed to be done. And Henry learned early that the world does not reward wishes. It rewards effort. At 8 years old, while other children played in streets that smelled of soot and sulfur, Henry was in a garden. 4 acres in Sharpsburg, soil under his nails, stems in his hands, baskets heavy against his small arms. He packed vegetables, he carried, he sorted. He listened to adults talk about money, weather, and survival like it was scripture. By 12, he was already a trader. Not in theory, in practice. He drove a cart loaded with produce, going from neighbor to neighbor, learning the invisible art of business, how to read a face, how to negotiate without sounding desperate, how to smile without giving away weakness, how to make people trust you when you were still a child. This wasn't a fairy tale childhood. It was training. And hidden inside this ordinary biography was a detail, small, almost silly at first glance, that would become the foundation of everything. The foundation of his empire, the foundation of his philosophy, and later, the foundation of his mansion. Transparent glass. In the mid-19th century, American food production was a battlefield of deception. There were no real protections for consumers. No standard inspections. No consistent labeling. No strong laws. It was an era when people could sell poison and call it dinner. Flour was cut with plaster. Cocoa was darkened with brick dust. Horseradish could be cheap turnips shredded into a lie. And the trick worked because the packaging worked. Companies sold in dark bottles, green, brown, opaque, so the buyer couldn't see what they were buying. The truth stayed hidden until the jar was opened at home. By then it was too late. The seller was gone. The money was gone. The shame was yours. Henry Heinz stared at that world and decided the opposite. He began selling his mother's grated horseradish in clear, transparent glass jars. It sounds simple now. Almost obvious. But at the time it was rebellion. Transparent glass cost more. It was risk. It was a challenge to an entire culture of hidden rot. The jar was not just a container, it was a statement. I have nothing to hide. That was marketing, yes, but it was also ego and ethics. An obsession. Henry believed quality should be visible. That purity should not need darkness to survive. That a product should stand under light and not fear what the customer sees. And whether he knew it or not. This idea planted something deep inside him, a hunger for perfection, control, cleanliness, and proof. In a dirty city where everything was stained, he was the man who wanted things to look clean. In a marketplace built on lies, he wanted an object that forced truth. That obsession would later shape the architecture of Green Lawn, where light would become almost holy, where glass would be protection, where everything would be curated, arranged, controlled. But before Henry could build a palace, life would grind him down into something harder. Because the path to immortality didn't begin with applause. It began with humiliation. 1875, the United States is still shaken by the financial panic of 1873. The economy is collapsing, jobs vanish. Banks tighten like fists. Families who believed they were stable discover stability is an illusion. Henry Heinz is 30 years old, a Lutheran raised on discipline and reputation. He has a company, his first real attempt at greatness, and it falls apart. His business goes bankrupt. Today, people call that a setback, a chapter, a lesson. But in the 19th century, bankruptcy was not a mistake, it was a stain. It was treated like theft, like moral failure, like a sign you were rotten inside. And it gets worse. In December 1875, Henry Heinz is arrested on charges of fraud. Even if he is released quickly, the damage is permanent. In a city like Pittsburgh, reputation was currency. And his currency was destroyed. Newspapers talk. Neighbors whisper. Friends look away. He loses the house. He loses the furniture. He loses the ability to walk into a room without feeling eyes on him. He has a wife, Sarah, Sally, and small children who need to eat. And now he has nothing. Not just no money. No dignity. For a man obsessed with purity, this is the worst possible hell, public disgrace. And this is where the story turns darker. Because disgrace doesn't always break a man. Sometimes it rewrites him. In that period, Henry begins keeping a list. Not a business list. Not inventory. A list of every creditor. Every debt. Every name. He calls it his book of moral debts. By law, after bankruptcy, he does not have to repay everything. He could have walked away like many did. But Henry is not built to walk away. His religion, his pride, his obsession with being seen as clean, it won't allow it. He vows to repay every penny. Not because he must. Because he needs to erase the stain. The years that follow are brutal. He cannot easily conduct business under his own name, so he works as a manager in relatives' companies. He works like a man being hunted. 18 hours a day, relentless, surgical, fanatical. He studies production, controls quality, expands product lines, turns vegetable canning into a science. This is no longer the boy with a cart. This is a man forging himself into a machine. And slowly, the city that mocked him begins to swallow its laughter. By 1890, Henry Heinz has not only repaid his debts, he becomes one of the richest men in Pittsburgh. But he is not the same man. The bankruptcy did not simply teach him business. It taught him something colder: to be respected. It is not enough to be good. You must be grand. You must create symbols. Money stops being the goal. It becomes a tool for building a world that cannot be questioned, a world that announces his victory before anyone dares to doubt him again. So he begins to travel. Europe becomes his classroom. France, England, old estates, ancient rooms, stone walls that look like they've survived centuries of war, plague, and weather. Castles that don't just shelter families, they declare power. And Henry understands something dangerous. He doesn't just want a home, he wants a monument. He wants a fortress built from proof. Because somewhere inside him, the humiliation of 1875 is still alive, still whispering that everything can be taken, that respect is fragile, that the world will call you a fraud if it gets the chance. So he decides to build something that cannot be laughed at. A place that says, I belonged here all along. He buys land in the prestigious Point Breeze district, Pittsburgh's Olympus, where the city's old money lives. Bankers, industrialists. Names that sound like steel and railroads. George Westinghouse, Henry Clay Frick, Andrew Carnegie. People who, in their private thoughts, likely still saw Heinz as a pickle seller who got lucky. Henry doesn't move there to blend in. He moves there to outshine. He plans to build a house that eclipses them all. A house that functions like a verdict against the past. A house that will prove to every banker and every neighbor who looked down on him that Henry Heinz didn't just survive, he triumphed. And this is where Green Lawn begins, not as architecture, but as psychology. Because the mansion was never only about comfort. It was about control. It was about sealing his family inside a perfect world, far from suit, far from shame, far from the chaos of a city that had once watched him fall. But there was one thing Henry could not control: time. At the moment he signs papers and the plans begin to form, something invisible is already moving toward him, something that will turn his palace from a sanctuary into a tomb. Because Green Lawn was built on love, and love, unlike stone, can die. To understand Green Lawn, one must first understand the marriage that gave it meaning. At the end of the 19th century, among Pittsburgh's industrial elite, wives were often treated as ornamental proof of success. Silk, lace, society dinners, carefully staged appearances in newspapers. A man built steel or railroads, a woman confirmed his arrival. Sarah, Sally, Sloane Young was not that kind of woman. She was not a trophy, she was a stabilizer. When Henry Heinz married Sally in 1869, he did more than marry into a respected Scottish, Irish Presbyterian family. Though that alone mattered in a city obsessed with pedigree. He married someone emotionally stronger than himself. Sally possessed what Henry lacked: calm endurance. When bankruptcy crushed him in 1875, when newspapers wrote his disgrace and neighbors looked away, Henry collapsed inward. Shame paralyzed him. For days, sometimes weeks, he could barely rise from bed. It was Sally who stayed. She did not lecture him about lost money or sold furniture. She did not demand explanations or apologies. She spoke quietly of the future, of rebuilding, of children who still needed a father who stood upright. This was not romance in the theatrical sense. It was partnership. German Lutheran aggression fused with Scottish-Irish stoicism. His hunger met her restraint. His ambition rested against her emotional ballast. This union became the invisible engine of everything that followed. By the early 1890s, the debts were paid. The brand was expanding beyond Pittsburgh, Europe, Latin America. The world was learning the name Heinz. And with success came a realization that had nothing to do with profit margins. They could not stay where they were. The north side of Pittsburgh, the factory district, was the beating heart of the industrial machine. Henry loved it, but it was brutal. Soot-coated lungs. Noise never slept. Even at night, machinery roared like a restless animal. He wanted his family removed from it. Not in luxury, but in safety. In 1892, Henry made his most symbolic move yet. He purchased land in Point Breeze. This was not just real estate. Point Breeze was a statement. Here lived the city's untouchables, men whose surnames were already history. To move there meant equality. To build there meant confrontation. But Henry did something unexpected. He did not tear down the existing mansion on the land. He moved it. The house, previously owned by Harry Hopkins, was lifted and shifted deeper into the lot, making room for grand additions. It was an engineering feat, but also a metaphor. Henry never erased the past. He built on top of it. This was the philosophy behind Green Lawn. Preserve what exists. Improve everything else. Together. Henry and Sally began designing not just a residence, but a sealed world. The plans bordered on fantasy for the time. A private power plant in the basement. Advanced heating systems. Air filtration to fight Pittsburgh's soot. This was Victorian beauty fused with technological obsession. The same mind that demanded transparency in glass jars now demanded sterility in living space. Letters from this period reveal something rare. Tenderness. Henry discusses wallpaper choices with Sally. Fireplace placements, window sizes. The flow of rooms. He is not building for guests. He is building for her, for children, for a future that feels safe from humiliation. Green Lawn is conceived as protection, not from crime, not from poverty, from memory. Sally dreams of gardens. Henry dreams of walls. While other magnates build palaces for balls and champagne, the Heinz household designs a fortress for internal exile. They are deeply religious. Sundays belong to church, not society gossip. They do not want to perform wealth, they want refuge. By 1893, scaffolding covers the estate. Hundreds of workers carve stone and shape facades. The dream becomes visible. Henry stands on the lawn beside Sally, watching history rise from soil that once held nothing but ambition. This is his moment of triumph. But ancient tragedy has a rule. The gods give everything just before they take the one thing that matters. Because while the walls rise, Sally's body begins to betray her. It happens quietly. No dramatic collapse. No warning thunder. Just fatigue, illness, shortness of breath. The house grows larger. The future grows smaller. Biological clocks do not care about architecture. Green Lawn was designed to echo with generations. Children, grandchildren, long dinners at massive oak tables. But the foundation of that dream, the woman who made Henry human, was already cracking. This is where Green Lawn's destiny shifts. What was meant to be a nest begins its transformation into a shrine. Rooms designed for laughter prepare instead for silence. Hallways built for footsteps prepare to amplify absence. The house is almost complete, but its soul is already in danger. Henry does not see it yet. He believes he is building permanence. He does not realize he is racing time and losing. Because love cannot be reinforced with stone. And paradise, once empty, becomes unbearable. By the beginning of the 20th century, Green Lawn stood like an anomaly in Pittsburgh, a contradiction made of stone, glass, and silence. Behind the wrought iron fence, the city seemed to stop. Soot ended at the boundary, noise faded. Coal dust gave way to manicured lawns and controlled air. What existed beyond the gate was industry and chaos. What existed within was order taken to its extreme. Green Lawn was not merely a mansion. It was Henry Heinz's autobiography, written in architecture. 3 stories rose in French chateau style, punctured by turrets and chimneys that clawed at the gray Pennsylvania sky. The roofline was complex, almost aggressive, as if the house itself refused to be overlooked. But the true meaning of Green Lawn revealed itself only after crossing the threshold. The doors closed, and the outside world vanished. Inside, sound was swallowed. The roar of Penn Avenue dissolved into stillness. The first sensation was not visual but sensory. The smell of beeswax, old paper, varnished wood, controlled, intentional. Nothing here was accidental. Mosaic floors spread beneath hand-painted ceilings. Light filtered carefully, deliberately, through stained glass chosen not for color alone, but for emotional effect. Each room unfolded into another in a formal enfilade. Spaces designed not for improvisation but for procession. This was not a house meant to be lived in casually. It was a house meant to be maintained. Henry Heinz suffered from a relentless need for order. Green Lawn became the physical manifestation of that compulsion. In an era when gas lighting blackened walls and ceilings, he installed electricity everywhere. He wanted clarity, no shadows, no ambiguity. Light was moral. As guests moved deeper into the estate, they encountered rooms that felt less like living spaces and more like curated exhibits. French furniture in gold brocade, silk-covered walls, display cases holding not dishes but history itself. Green Lawn resembled a museum more than a home. Henry collected obsessively. Ivory carvings from Asia and Africa, stored behind glass in mahogany cabinets. Ancient weapons. Rare artifacts whose value lay not only in beauty but in endurance. He spoke of them like living witnesses, proof that craftsmanship could defy time. But the most psychologically charged objects were the clocks. They were everywhere. Grandfather clocks, mantel clocks, pocket chronometers from Germany, Switzerland, England. Hundreds of them. Each ticking to its own rhythm, creating a dissonant chorus that filled the house. Imagine the sound. A vast, nearly silent mansion, interrupted only by the uneven heartbeat of time. Every week, a specialist arrived to win them all. For Henry, this ritual was sacred. The man who built an empire on efficiency surrounded himself with time he could see, touch, regulate. He could not stop time, but he could command it. The brightest place in Green Lawn stood in deliberate contrast to the ticking halls, the winter garden. 10 greenhouses, connected and scattered across the estate, created a controlled microclimate. Under glass domes, orchids bloomed year-round. Exotic fruits ripened while Pittsburgh's snow lay gray and lifeless outside. This was where Henry spent his mornings. The boy who once worked soil at 8 years old never forgot the earth. But here, nature was disciplined. Plants stood in perfect ranks, like jars on a factory shelf, every leaf inspected, every blemish removed. This was not a garden. It was domination. Upstairs, 7 bedrooms waited, each with its own private bathroom, an unheard-of luxury in the 1890s. Plumbing was hidden behind marble and tile, creating an illusion of sterility that bordered on clinical. Henry believed physical cleanliness led to moral purity. The house reflected that belief everywhere. The music room held an organ. On Sundays, instead of laughter or social gossip, hymns shook the walls. Green Lawn became a private church. No frivolity, no indulgence. Paintings showed landscapes, ancestors, historical figures, nothing that might challenge the rigid moral gaze of a Lutheran patriarch. The dining room could seat 30. A massive oak table waited for generations. But something was wrong. If you study photographs of Green Lawn's interior, a strange coldness appears. Furniture stands too perfectly. Rugs are untouched. Objects lie as though no one dares disturb them. This house was not lived in, it was preserved, and the reason lay in a single absence. The queen of this castle, Sarah Heinz, was gone. In November of 1894, while craftsmen applied final gilding and gardeners planted roses, death entered Green Lawn before life ever truly could. Pneumonia. At the end of the 19th century, doctors called it the captain of the army of death. No antibiotics, no machines, no amount of money could purchase breath. Thanksgiving Day. In homes across Pittsburgh, families gathered around tables. Inside Green Lawn, silence thickened. Doctors whispered. Servants moved softly as if sound itself might kill. Sarah Heinz lay dying in one of the very bedrooms designed to shelter her for decades. She was 51. Just days earlier, she had been arranging flowers, discussing Christmas plans. Now Henry stood helpless, factories' fortunes, and discipline rendered useless against inflammation in human lungs. Death came quickly, and with it, something inside Henry died too. Sarah was not just his wife, she was his anchor. The only person who remembered him before success. The only witness to his disgrace who never judged him. His moral compass. When she died, that compass shattered. Green Lawn changed instantly. Before November 29th, it was a home. After it became a mausoleum. Rooms built for warmth turned into echo chambers. Mirrors meant to reflect joy now reflected a single, aging man. The house absorbed grief like stone absorbs cold. Henry did not retreat. He filled the void with things. Collecting turned manic. Travel intensified. Egypt, Palestine, Europe. Objects arrived not as souvenirs, but as defenses against mortality. Ancient artifacts, mummies, clocks, things that had survived centuries. If he surrounded himself with endurance, perhaps death would feel smaller. But there was a cost. He became an absent father in a house he controlled absolutely. He loved his children, but his love was heavy, instructional, suffocating. Letters replaced conversation. Order replaced warmth. To the outside world, Henry Heinz was a saint of industry, philanthropist, reformer, champion of food safety. Inside Green Lawn, he was a widower entombed in perfection. The house demanded life, but it received discipline. And discipline without love becomes cold. This was the moment Green Lawn ceased to be a dream. It became a warning. After Sarah's death, Green Lawn did not change in appearance. It changed in temperature. Not physical temperature, the coal still burned, the pipes still ran warm, but emotional temperature. Something essential was gone, and what remained hardened around the absence like a cast around a broken bone. Henry Heinz did not leave the house. He expanded it. Grief, for him, was not something to be expressed. It was something to be managed, organized, controlled. And so the man who once built systems to preserve food now turned those same instincts inward, trying to preserve meaning itself. He filled Green Lawn with objects because objects did not abandon him. History did not die suddenly in a bedroom. Artifacts did not gasp for breath. Clocks, if worn properly, obeyed. What had once been a hobby, collecting, became a fixation. Henry began buying in volume, not taste. Entire collections crossed oceans to reach Pittsburgh. Ancient relics, rare clocks, carvings and weapons and fragments of civilizations that had already collapsed. The logic was simple, though unspoken. If these things survived empires, perhaps they could survive loss. Green Lawn transformed fully into a private museum. Display cases multiplied. Rooms lost their function and gained labels. Silence deepened. Broken only by ticking and footsteps measured carefully, as if the house itself demanded reverence. And in the center of it all stood Henry, still powerful, still respected, still feared, but increasingly alone. To the outside world, he became something close to a moral icon. Inside his factories, he introduced reforms unheard of in his era. Clean working conditions. Showers, changing rooms, hot meals, manicure rooms for women handling food products. He fought publicly for food safety laws, pushing for transparency and regulation that would protect millions. He lobbied for what would become the Pure Food and Drug Act, standing against competitors who poisoned the public for profit. Newspapers praised him. Politicians listened. Workers respected him. Henry Heinz became the conscience of American capitalism, but conscience, when disconnected from intimacy, turns rigid. At home, his children grew up inside a paradox. Imagine childhood inside Green Lawn. Your home is famous. Your father's name is everywhere. Your mother exists only in portraits. Every room reminds you of absence. Every object reminds you of expectation. Nothing can be touched casually. Nothing belongs to you, it belongs to history, to memory, to father. Henry loved his children deeply, but his love was instructional, conditional, suffocating. He wrote letters to them even when they were in the same house. He dictated behavior. He corrected posture, speech, habits. In Green Lawn, childhood was not exploration, it was rehearsal. Howard Clifford and Irene were raised not as heirs, but as custodians of a legend still alive. They were expected to embody purity, discipline, restraint. Failure was not just personal, it was a stain on the family name. Their father was not cruel. He was absolute. Without Sarah, there was no buffer between perfection and humanity. No one softened the edges. No one reminded Henry that life must be lived, not curated. The house reflected this shift. The dining room remained capable of seating 30, but meals were quiet. The music room echoed with hymns, not laughter. Bedrooms were immaculate, untouched by chaos. The gardens remained perfect, but joy did not grow there. Green Lawn became a golden cage, and the children felt it before they understood it. As the years passed, Henry aged, but the house did not. It remained frozen in a perpetual present, clean, ordered, lifeless. He continued adding rooms, greenhouses, display halls, as if expansion could outrun grief. But grief is patient. By the 1900s, Green Lawn was a legend in Pittsburgh. Newspapers wrote about it. Guests attended formal dinners and admired mosaics, clocks, and organ music. But few noticed the sadness in Henry's eyes as he sat at the head of the table. He owned everything, but none of it loved him back. The tragedy unfolding was subtle, not violent. No shouting, no scandal, just distance. Emotional frost creeping between walls built for warmth. The children watched. They saw how objects replaced people. How silence replaced affection. How the house consumed their father. And somewhere, quietly, a dangerous thought formed, one that would not fully surface until years later. This house is not our inheritance. This house is our father. And when father is gone, what remains? Green Lawn demanded life, noise, chaos, generations. But it received discipline and memory. And memory, when unshared, becomes unbearable. By the time Henry Heinz approached the end of his life, the house that was meant to unite a family had already divided it. The explosion had not happened yet, but the fuse was burning. May 14, 1919. Pittsburgh wakes into a world that has already changed forever. The Great War ended only 6 months earlier. The Spanish flu has torn through cities, leaving millions dead and entire families hollowed out. Humanity is exhausted. Faith in permanence has been shaken. On this spring morning, inside a bedroom on the second floor of Green Lawn, Henry John Heinz loses his final battle. The enemy is the same one that took Sarah 25 years earlier. Pneumonia. At 74 years old, the man who built an empire on cleanliness, health, and control dies from the inability to draw breath. There is cruel symmetry in it. All his discipline, all his systems, all his wealth are powerless against a pair of failing lungs. For Green Lawn, this is the moment everything it was built for finally occurs. The house becomes a stage. Henry's body lies in the great hall, surrounded by lilies and orchids cut from his beloved greenhouses. For the first time in decades, the mansion is full of people. Thousands pass through the wrought iron gates to pay their respects. Pennsylvania's elite move through rooms that once echoed only with ticking clocks. For a few hours, Green Lawn lives. Organ music fills the halls. Whispered condolences bounce off stone walls. The house fulfills its last ceremonial purpose, not as a home, but as a monument. Then the doors close, the hearse departs, and Green Lawn enters a coma, Without Henry, the house has no function. It does not adapt. It does not soften. It freezes. Howard Heinz, 42 years old, now stands at the center of everything: family, business, legacy. He is not his father. He does not live in the 19th century. He belongs to the new age, an age of accounting, taxation, efficiency, and speed. When Howard walks into his father's office, he does not see reverence. He sees catastrophe. The world has shifted. Federal income taxes now bite deeply. Wealth is no longer invisible. Maintaining green lawn requires dozens of servants, gardeners, stokers, and caretakers. 30 rooms, 10 greenhouses, endless coal bills, roof repairs, electrical upkeep. The mansion bleeds money. In another era, this would be called prestige. In 1920, it is called liability. Green lawn becomes a white elephant in the purest sense, sacred, untouchable, and ruinous. But the problem is not only financial, it is psychological. Howard and his siblings grew up in green lawn, but it was never theirs. It was their father's mind made physical. To live there would mean eternal childhood, caretakers of someone else's grief, prisoners of his memory. Every chair dictates how you sit. Every object tells you what you cannot touch. Every room whispers, "You are not enough." The Hares understand something Henry never did. A house can outlive its purpose. The first act of liberation comes quietly. They begin with the collections. Henry's clocks, carvings, ivories, jade, weapons, decades of obsessive accumulation are not sold. There is no auction spectacle. Instead, the family donates them to the Carnegie Museum. This is the turning point. What once served one man's loneliness becomes public inheritance. History is freed from the mansion's prison. The artifacts breathe again, seen, studied, shared. But the building remains, and it is heavier than everything inside it. The heirs try to save it. They offer green lawn to the city of Pittsburgh, a gift, make it a museum, a library, a civic space. The city declines. Officials study the maintenance costs and shake their heads. The mansion is too far from the business center. The heating alone would bankrupt budgets. Repairs are endless. Even free, the house is unaffordable. Charities refuse. Universities refuse. The verdict is unanimous. The era of the Gilded Age is over. Gigantic Victorian palaces are dinosaurs, beautiful, inefficient, doomed. By 1923, green lawn stands empty. Servants dismissed. Furniture covered in white sheets like shrouds. The gardens overgrow. The greenhouses cloud over. Exotic plants die slowly in the cold. The house decays not from violence, but neglect. Howard faces a decision that feels like betrayal. Continue spending millions to preserve an empty shell, or destroy the body to save the future. He chooses the future. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. Howard redefines the Heinz legacy. Wealth, he decides, must serve the living, not the dead. Instead of feeding a haunted building, the family will build something open, useful, enduring. The idea of the Heinz Memorial Chapel is born. Not a fortress behind gates, but a place open to students, citizens, strangers, a space for education, spirituality, and light, a monument not to isolation but to service. But to build the new, the old must be erased. Early 1924. Contracts are signed. Land is sold to developers. The condition is absolute. Green lawn must go. The house that was meant to last centuries is declared debris. This is the final confrontation between ambition and time. Henry Heinz tried to buy immortality with stone and glass. His children understand that immortality lives elsewhere. And so the order is given: bring the workers, bring the tools, begin the demolition. Green lawn's execution is not rage, it is release. Pittsburgh, early 1924. The decision has already been made long before the first hammer swings. Paperwork is signed. The land is sold. The future is mapped out in clean lines and measured plots. What remains is not debate but procedure. Green lawn is sentenced. At dawn, workers arrive carrying crowbars, sledgehammers, ropes. There is no crowd, no ceremony, no final prayer. The mansion does not receive the dignity of a farewell. It is treated not as a fallen monument, but as an obstacle. Stone cracks under force. Glass explodes into glittering dust. Ornamental details once shipped across oceans are pried loose and stacked like scrap. French limestone, carved oak, Italian marble fireplaces are dismantled with methodical calm. This is not rage. This is surgery. Observers understand something unsettling. The house is being dismantled not by vandals, but by reason. The Gilded Age fantasy has expired, and the new century has no patience for mausoleums. The destruction unfolds slowly, almost respectfully. Materials are salvaged and sold. Stained glass windows are auctioned. Wood panels disappear into trucks. Fragments of green lawn scatter across Pennsylvania, becoming anonymous decorations in other people's homes. The palace dissolves into parts. And in this disassembly lies a strange truth. Green lawn was never meant to survive its creator. It required Henry Heinz's obsession to function, his discipline, his grief, his need to control time. Without him, the house becomes uninhabitable, like a machine with no operator. As walls fall, something else collapses with them. The illusion that permanence can be purchased. The land is surveyed, stakes appear. Where greenhouses once bloomed, lines are drawn for modest homes. The palace footprint shrinks into memory. Neighbors who move into the new houses will barbecue on lawns that once held orchids. Children will play where clocks once ticked in silence. No plaques will explain what stood here. History does not always announce itself, but destruction, paradoxically, brings clarity. Howard Heinz's decision, so shocking on the surface, reveals itself as transformation rather than betrayal. By destroying the physical shell, he liberates the spirit trapped inside it. Money that would have vanished into endless repairs is redirected. Energy once wasted preserving emptiness is invested in purpose. The family shifts from guarding memory to creating legacy. And this is where green lawn truly dies, so something stronger can live. Because the mansion failed at the one task it was designed for: nurturing life. It demanded reverence, not warmth. Obedience, not joy. Memory, not growth. The heirs understood what Henry could not accept, that a house built to freeze time becomes a prison for the future. Sometimes the most merciful act is demolition. Sometimes, to honor a life, you must let its symbols go. By mid-1924, green lawn is gone, no ruins, no remnants, just earth, quiet at last. But the story is not over, because destruction is not the final chapter, it is the threshold. By mid-1924, green lawn no longer exists. Not as a ruin, not as a ghostly shell, not even as a warning. It is gone with surgical completeness. Where towers once cut into the sky, there is only graded earth. Where clocks once counted time Henry Heinz could not control, there is silence. Surveyor stakes replace rose bushes. Modest houses rise, functional, efficient, forgettable. Families move in. Children run across lawns unaware that beneath their feet lies the foundation of one of America's most obsessive dreams. History rarely leaves markers for what it erases. But erasure is not the end of this story, because destruction in this case was not annihilation. It was conversion. Howard Heinz did something his father never could. He let go. The money that would have been burned keeping a dead house alive is redirected. The grief once locked behind iron gates is opened outward. From the ashes of green lawn rises a new idea, one not rooted in possession but in access. In 1938, 14 years after the demolition, the Heinz Memorial Chapel opens on the campus of the University of Pittsburgh. It is everything green lawn was not. Open, vertical, shared. A neo-Gothic structure with spires reaching upward instead of walls closing inward. Stained glass windows, among the tallest in the world, flood the interior with light. The values Henry and Sarah lived by are encoded in color and symbol: education, spirituality, discipline, service. But this time the light belongs to everyone: students, town residents, strangers passing through. Henry Heinz finally gets his monument, but not the one he imagined. Not a private fortress guarded by fences, but a public sanctuary that breathes. There is profound irony here. Henry spent his life trying to seal purity away from the world. His children understood that purity survives only when shared. Today, if you walk along Penn Avenue near where Green Lawn once stood, two fragments remain. The wrought iron fence still stretches along the street, black, heavy, unnecessary. Once it separated utopia from industrial filth. Now it guards nothing. It is a scar, a border of a kingdom that no longer exists. And deep in the block, the old carriage house survives. Horses once lived there. Carriages rested inside. Today it is a private home, modest, lived in, warm. The only physical witness to the scale that once dominated this land. And that contrast is the final lesson. The place where Henry Heinz earned money, the red brick factory along the Allegheny, proved adaptable. It survives today as lofts. People pay fortunes to live inside the machinery of industry. The place where he spent money, Green Lawn, proved intolerable. Victorian luxury lost to modern life. Function defeated grandeur. And yet, Henry Heinz did achieve immortality. Not through stone. Not through clocks. Not through walls. Through glass. In any supermarket on Earth, Tokyo, New York, London, you will find his name. The octagonal ketchup bottle. The label design unchanged for over a century. Transparent glass that still whispers the same message. I have nothing to hide. That is his real castle. Millions enter it every day. The tragedy of Green Lawn is not that it was destroyed. The tragedy is that Henry believed love, memory, and legacy could be preserved by isolation. America is not a country of inheritance. It is a country of movement. Children do not live in their father's museums. They build their own futures. Henry Heinz died believing he left his family a palace. His children demolished that palace to save his meaning from turning into mockery. They transformed dead stone into living purpose. If you listen carefully near the old fence, beneath traffic and footsteps, you can almost hear them. The faint ticking of hundreds of clocks, counting time no billionaire can command. Time that erases walls, but leaves names. This was liturgy of fear.